Hello and welcome to everyone joining us today for our panel discussion on the power of inequality. While it may sound like a backwards concept, particularly when everyone at this time of year focuses on women's equality in the workplace, it seems the perfect title to start a conversation because to us, embracing a person's inequality is actually what embracing equity is all about. I have the privilege of hosting our discussion today, and so for those who don't know me, I'm a partner with IDR Law, head of our Bristol office and team leader to one of our legal teams. My story into law was shared with you during the first podcast we recorded for International Women's Day last year. And so while I won't go into detail, I can confirm that it involved Elle Woods and a sheer determination to prove everyone wrong. For anyone interested in hearing what Legally Blonde may have had to do with the start of my career, I'll make sure to post a link. I'm joined today by three of my colleagues: Lindsay Gibson, Head of Marketing, Eleanor Stenson, Senior Associate, Head of Training and Team Leader to one of our legal teams, and Hannah Coton-Smith, Trainee Solicitor in our Bristol office. As I touched on earlier, the theme for this year's International Women's Day is embracing equity. And I won't lie, I had to Google what equity meant in this scenario. A bit of a spoiler alert, it isn't that portion of unmortgaged property that some people own. Equality is something now ingrained in many of us that need to be fair. As a result, women can now get an education, work, vote, and go to university. We can also join the traditional male professions, such as the legal profession. While many listening may think I'm referring to the Stone Ages by making these comments, it is important to realise that it has only been just over 150 years since the first woman attended a university, 105 years since women were first able to vote, and 100 years since women were permitted to become lawyers in the UK, and that was Carrie Morrison in December 1922. So given the history of time, it's not very long at all. So why are we now striving for equity, and what does it actually mean? In its simplest form, it is making reasonable adjustments to enable a person to have the same chances of success as the next person. It's not just for women, it's for everyone. There's a well-known image of 6 or 7 different animals in a class with a teacher saying the test today will be to climb a tree. While a monkey will be able to do this, a giraffe clearly won't, and so the giraffe will inevitably fail. Clearly in this scenario, the test was not fair, and the inevitable outcome would be the giraffe missing out on future possibilities. However, when such an example is looked at closely, reasonable adjustments may have meant that the giraffe was equally able to pass the test. If, for example, the test had been to reach something from the top branch of a tree, the monkey will still have had to climb, and in doing so would likely pass the test. But the giraffe could just reach it with its long neck. The giraffe didn't have to climb the tree to achieve the same result as the monkey, but both still achieved the same outcome. And that is what equity is all about. The same can be applied to people, and the help or hindrance a school or workplace provides to its students and staff can mean a very different career path for a person. Today, I will be inviting the panel to discuss their career path and any obstacles in their way or help that was given to them. And in doing so, I hope we're able to bring new ideas, or at the very least awareness, to the issues that many of us face today. I'd first like to introduce Lindsay Gibson. Lindsay, can you tell us a little about yourself, your role, and how you came to work at IDR Law?
Yeah, so I guess way back when, after in university, I studied English literature and media. It quickly became apparent that I had a real interest in media and communications, and I wanted to progress my career in that area. So following university, I spotted a job in a newspaper. Yes, I am that old, but it wasn't on Indeed. It was in a newspaper. And it was for a marketing admin role in a financial company. So I took that role, and it was a varied role. Got to, hang out with the marketing manager, learn more about marketing, in between emptying the bins for the underwriters and things like that. But essentially, it got me on that career ladder. Following that role, I went into more of a branding role in luxury travel. So I was a marketing executive, but it was more branding in like print media. I got to work with the likes of Condé Nast Traveller, Harper's Bazaar, doing like glossy print advertising. So it was very nice, working with in that sort of branding position. As I was there, digital marketing was coming more into play, and I realised that I needed to probably gain some more experience in data-driven marketing, which is what I basically saw a role for a marketing executive in Park Christmas Savings. And that is where I began my dip, so my marketing diploma with the Institute of Direct Marketing. As I was doing all of this at the same time in tandem, my husband was running his own business, and the business started to take off and needed that sort of business support and marketing support at the same time. So it was a bit of a risk, but I decided to jump in and help him run the business. And we did that for 7 years. We built up a good, stable nursery portrait photography business. We acquired over 40 nurseries across the UK, and it was really going from strength to strength. Unfortunately, one of those gloomy COVID stories, COVID hit, and we could have continued with it, but it would have just been a bit of a strife getting it back to where it was. And we always knew with my marketing experience, I could just go back into the world of marketing. So I ended up in Today's Wills and Probate. Listeners probably heard it, legal publisher, marketing for their clients and doing their marketing there. And finally, that just brings me up to date. I was offered a role at IDR as head of marketing, and here I am. So a bit of a crazy eclectic mix to get here, but I'm here.
It's a hugely useful backstory though into the different types of marketing you've experienced through your journey. It's, you know, incredibly useful for today's marketplace. But how did you find that journey to head of marketing? Was it did you have any expectations of what it might be like as a woman in the workplace? Has it always been plain sailing?
Well, I guess I don't want to sound like that person, but yeah, it has kind of been plain sailing for me. And I think it's based around timing of my career. So if we go back to when I was working in Park Christmas Savings and the luxury travel companies, it was a very female dominated area. Marketing tends to be anyway, but my peers, my colleagues and my managers were all female. And they were the same age as what I am now, and having babies, looking after toddlers and such. And I could see that, you know, the chats in the workplace when we were having those coffee chats and office chit chat, and they would talk about the struggles that they were having on the 9 to 5 and going off because the children were sick. And I'd be like, oh, hold on, where's such and such? I need to get this answer on this certain piece of data. And it'd be like, oh, they've had to leave because their child's sick. And I'd be a bit like, really? And that just shows how wrong I was at a clueless 20-something. And I feel a bit bad about it now, to be honest. So sorry if any of you are listening. I'd be a bit like, hey, what, they've gone home? But fast forward to when I had my own business, ran the business for a few years, then decided we wanted to start having children. Obviously, it was a real privilege, I guess, for me to be able to have children and run the business at the same time, because it offered great amounts of flexibility. I was also, but then there was pros and cons, and from a cons point of view, I didn't get structured mat leave like everybody else. So when I was watching my female friends that had met in baby group go to all these different sessions together, I'd be like, oh, hold on now, I need to make sure that e-shot is out so that we can acquire enough customers to pay our mortgage that month, for instance. And I was back at work quite early answering customer queries and all sorts. So I guess that was a bit of a con, but also it did offer that flexibility for me. And then obviously by the time I came back to work, flexibility came back into the structured workplace. From being self-employed, flexibility was huge anyway because of COVID. And that was apparent in the legal publishing company and also IDR, although with IDR, we've been flexible, whether it was COVID or not COVID, we were flexible way before COVID anyway. But with regards to IDR, I guess I get to commit myself to a challenging role. It's completely autonomous. And I also get to look after my 4 and 6 year old. I'm able to go and sometimes pick them up from school, drop them off at school, pick them up if they're sick, and there's absolutely no judgment. So effectively, I guess my journey has had lots of equitable benefits, and I would completely put that down to timing.
It's funny you should say about how flexibility came in after COVID, because certainly in my own experience, and I'm sure many listeners and the rest of the panel here today, is that actually pre-COVID flexibility just did not exist, certainly not in law firms. It was an expectation that you would be in, not just for your normal hours, but probably longer than your normal hours. And any absence, like you were saying, back in your 20s, when you're like, oh, where has Joe Bloggs gone? It was that would be very, not officially frowned upon, but it would have an impact on your career. And while COVID obviously was an awful time for a lot of people for a lot of reasons, it did bring about this change. I'm certainly seeing a creep back in of the old ways across the board at different places. We, as you quite rightly say, IDR has never been rigid in that way, and so never will be. But that is definitely something that I'm seeing coming back in. And from what you've just described, actually your career path was exactly what you needed it to be, and that's brilliant. But those coming up through now, if we are going back to those, and I don't want to date mark this as the pre-COVID ways, but if places are going back to that pre-COVID way, it's going to be an awful lot harder for people to go and see their children at school plays, or to balance that work-life balance if their children aren't very well.
Yeah, completely. And it's just, it's so much better now that we've got that flexibility in place. But I totally understand where you're coming from with regards to pre-COVID ways. I mean, I used to be quite scared to leave my desk at 5 o'clock, even when I was a 20-something. I'd literally sit there and sometimes pretend to work for half an hour just so I looked good.
Yeah, there's a lot to be said for appearances, isn't there? It's that presenteeism.
Exactly.
It's everywhere.
Exactly. So yeah, hopefully, hopefully we don't go back to that. But you know, as you say, there are situations crop up, and we can see it start to becoming more apparent, I guess.
Yeah. So I suppose it's always surprising then how many different paths and experiences an individual can have to success. We've just heard about yours, Lindsay, and it was, you know, a fantastic route, and I'm very pleased that you got to experience that, because that's what we would hope every woman and every person gets to experience. We each carry our own baggage and our own weight to get to our level of success. And it's clearly never going to be fair or right to judge two people, whether you do so equally or otherwise, and doing so will see businesses lose talented people. It will also see schools and universities discouraging some of the brightest people around. The measure of success should not be on how well you can modify yourself as a circle to fit into a square hole. The measure of success should be how well you do as a circle in a school or business that appreciates what you can bring to the table. So while on that subject of expectations versus reality, I'd like to introduce Eleanor Stenson. Eleanor, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, your role, and your career path to IDR Law?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So my role is as a senior associate, which to most people doesn't make a whole load of sense. But what it means is that I'm a solicitor, so I'm legally qualified, but I'm also, within the firm, I'm also tasked with other responsibilities, and the role of senior associate is a recognition of a level of experience and taking on those additional responsibilities within the firm. So the additional responsibilities that I have are to make sure that the team that I manage works well and is doing the client work properly and making sure that bills are sent and that money is being made, but that also those clients are being looked after and that the work that's being done is being done well. Additionally, I have the responsibility of looking after training within the firm, and that extends quite widely. So it's about providing training for the legal professionals within the firm, making sure there is access to technical legal updates, case updates, but also different types of training to make sure that they're not just doing the legal work well, but they're also looking after the clients well, and they're complying with the regulations that we have to comply with in terms of our accounting and billing processes. So it's quite wide-ranging in that respect. But the benefit, for the purposes of our discussion today, of that role is the fact that I can see a lot of different situations in which equality and equity, and like you, Cara, I did have to Google it, how those two concepts impact on recruitment, and how the legal industry continues to operate and continues to grow by recruiting junior staff and recruiting trainee solicitors into the firm, so that that business continues to work and works at the right sort of levels to enable us to offer a full service to the clients in the way that we do. Within this, not all solicitors' firms are created equal, and no two employees are created equal either. But how does the equality and equity point work when you're looking at recruiting from potentially a really large pool of interested candidates? I think for me, the key point was about the recruitment of trainee solicitors, because many firms will look at trainee recruitment as some sort of Hunger Games style process, where thousands of prospective candidates come through a number of assessment days, or rigorous kind of examinations and assessments, which yes, they have a purpose, and yes, they do allow those firms to look at a large number of people along equal categories, and a lot, with equal levels of sort of attainment, so that they can make their decisions accordingly and find what they might perceive to be the best candidates from that bunch. But for us, and for many smaller firms, the recruitment of trainee solicitors is not just about numbers, it's about finding the right person for the right role. And when you undertake such a large scale recruitment approach, it can often result in the people hitting various attainment targets as part of these assessments, but actually ultimately not being the right fit for the firm, and then being unhappy when they qualify. So this equality approach in the recruitment of trainee solicitors can actually result in unhappy people not staying on post-qualification, and at an early stage in their career potentially being pretty disillusioned with their role. And I think that for me, the way that I came through the process was that I applied to a number of different firms, literally sending CVs and sending, or completing application forms, rather than going through those large scale assessment centres. I did one, but immediately I knew that that wasn't something for me. And the thing that I'd always been mindful of was that employers tend to recruit in their own image, and therefore it isn't necessarily about hitting marks or hitting achievements in an assessment centre, but rather being the right personality fit for the role and learning how to do the job along the way. The emphasis being on training contract rather than accomplishment contract, where you are expected to know everything on day one. So for when we look at recruitment of trainees, we look at the people, we look at the individuals, we look at their own circumstances, and we look at how they are going to fit within the business, but also how the business fits with them and their lives. The best way that we know how to apply equity to that process is to allow prospective trainee solicitors to come and work for us as paralegals, which gives them a great amount of exposure to legal work. It gives them great experience, but also it allows us to get to understand them and what matters to them, and how their life needs to fit around work and how work needs to fit around their life. And that allows us then to look at what we pride ourselves on offering, which is a flexible approach to work-life balance, and also the ability to either study alongside, you know, paralegal work, and then begin a training contract on a part-time basis or a full-time basis, or whatever it needs to look like to make it work for the individual. So not looking at a large-scale blanket approach, which, although it may work to get bums on seats, might just result in that person being desperately unhappy in the first couple of years of qualification and leaving, but rather looking at the individuals and making sure that that investment, because it is an investment, not just in that person, but financial investment by the firm, that investment pays off, and that the individual is happy and fulfilled in their chosen career, because nobody enters into the path to becoming a solicitor lightly, and nobody enters into it thinking, oh, I may just not bother with this when it comes to the training contract, I'll just probably, you know, leave it, because by that point you're 7 years deep or whatever, and you are so committed to this, and you're so committed to your career choice, and that, you know, it is absolutely what you want to achieve. But where you are limited in how that can be done, it does shut people out, and it shuts really great quality people out of the market. So it seems to me that there's definitely a benefit to equity in approaching recruitment, even though the standard seems to be an equality approach. Let's treat everybody the same and hope for the best. And, you know, not necessarily everybody coming out of it happier than they might have been elsewhere in the right sort of place for them.
I really loved your reference there to the Hunger Games, because certainly, although it was a number of years ago, that was exactly what it was like. It was a great reference. But you're equally absolutely right. It's an investment for the future, but not just for the firm or for the person. It's for everybody. And your point about being disillusioned by by legal practice, that can happen. And I can see us, if generally speaking, law firms don't change their ways, law will not be something to strive for, because nobody's going to want that commitment in their life, because it's career versus a life. And,
yes.
And nobody is going to want that. And that's problematic, because we need lawyers.
Yeah, absolutely. And we need female lawyers, and it's the female lawyers who are the ones who will, in most cases, vastly in most cases, be the default parent. They'll be the ones that are being called by the nursery and the school to go and pick the kids up, and, you know, they're the ones that are having to manage the children's lives alongside work. So we need to make sure that that is taken into account, and that there isn't the sort of presenteeism of old. And, you know, the benefit of remote working and flexible working just means that those really high quality, you know, great people are able to be trusted to manage their life and their work, which, as we know, is perfectly possible. It's just that you need the space and the trust to do that.
Yeah, trust is a huge thing, isn't it? And it always surprises me that if you work for a company that doesn't trust you, why are they still employing you? Because
absolutely,
and it's got to be trust both ways, absolutely. But if you can't trust your employees to do the job you're essentially paying them to do, then they're not at the right company, and they're not the right employee for you, and vice versa. So yeah. It's, you know, it is really important.
It is.
Thank you very much for all that. It's incredibly insightful, and it's lovely to hear it from the training perspective as well, because that's very unusual. Most people talk about their own personal experiences, but not from a business looking in as to who we're going to bring in. Quite conveniently, actually, that discussion leads us nicely onto our next panelist, Hannah Coton-Smith. As our most junior member joining us today, Hannah, can you tell us a little about yourself and your experiences which have led you to a career with IDR Law?
Thank you. So I took an untraditional path into law. I started years ago now as a legal secretary initially and wanted to always work my way up in a firm. So I then started studying towards my law degree. I did that part-time as well as working. And the firms that I was with over that period of time did allow me to condense my hours, which I was thought was quite helpful. And it took into account the fact that I was studying alongside working. So I found that was an equitable approach, and they didn't have to do it. So it's helpful. But more recently, I've been doing my LPC as well as having a toddler. So I've had lots more thrown at me over the years, but that's why ending up at IDR like I have, it's been hugely beneficial because it takes into account my circumstances and doesn't give that blanket tailored approach. So I started off as a paralegal, which Eleanor obviously explained, gives the firm the opportunity to get to know you, but also the opportunity to get to know the firm and how it can fit within your life and vice versa. So I'm now on a trading contract with IDR, and I do that part-time and on a flexible arrangement. So I can do it around my childcare. So if I have to cover a gap within childcare or go and pick her up from nursery or whatever, I don't have the additional pressure of having to be present at my desk within the working hours. I can work it around whatever crops up, whatever life throws at me, but also I'm able to continue with my progression. I don't feel it holds me back, whereas I understand other firms still are very traditional and won't offer training contracts on a part-time basis, which if I'd have had to stay within that environment, I don't think I would have continued. I think I would have had to choose between my career or my family, which is not what you want, having worked so hard for so long. So working the flexible hours allows me to be present at home, but also progress within my career. And it's all due to the equitable approach that's been taken. And I think it creates a very inclusive environment and one that helps everyone progress within their chosen area, not just law, I'd hope, and especially obviously since COVID, most companies will offer more flexibility, but unfortunately I think there is some stepping backwards, which is a shame, but hopefully these kinds of discussions will mean that everyone is aware of it, that we have to take an equitable approach to ensure that everyone has the right opportunities.
To see the benefit of it, really, isn't it? Because it's so easy to look backwards and go, well, we've done this forever and it's worked perfectly fine and we've got decent lawyers, so why would we change, using law as an example? And having that rigid, like you were saying, I mean, going through your training contract application process, and I wasn't there for it, so I don't know particularly whether you were applying to lots of firms in the way that Eleanor described, the Hunger Games-esque, or the tailoring it, or whether it was just perchance in the paralegal role that you were in and that sort of situation. But even so, whichever way you come into it, you become acutely aware of what's happening around you. And what's happening around you, in my experience, was always you will work full time and you will do more than the 9 to 5 that we're paying you for. And not only that, we expect you, if you want to be kept on at the end, you need to be going over and above that. And that just does not fit with either today's society or with the aspirations that most people have these days, or with any sort of flexibility that's needed for a family life. So I know that we're really proud to be able to offer different experiences to our colleagues and meeting their needs. Obviously, the business has to be met, its needs have to be met, those are essential, but it doesn't have to be the expense of those working within it. And so I'm really pleased to hear that what you're saying is that actually by coming in, you have this flexible model that works for you. And at the end of it, you get the career that you've worked so hard for. You said the number of years that you've been training and all the rest of it. That's hugely, like a huge investment, like Eleanor was saying, to go through all of that and then to hit a training contract, which you might have taken because of that investment, only for 6 months in to go, oh, this is not working well. This is not juggling well. And to potentially leave the profession because of that. And I know from my experience of working alongside you, that would be awful to lose somebody that's got the talent that you have just because the work-life balance can't be what you need it to be at that stage of your life. And obviously that will change, or changes for all of us as children get older or parents get more elderly and they need help. It's not just about, your immediate children family, it's everything. And so I'm really pleased to hear that this is, exactly what you want it to be. Is there anything else from your experiences that you would like to share with any of our sort of viewers, listeners, about what that experience has been like, or do you think actually you've summed it up perfectly?
I think I summed it up quite well. I think my thoughts when I was thinking about what to say was that if you're just looking at full-time, if we're just sticking on training contracts, if you're just looking at full-time training contracts, you are only attracting a specific sort of person. And like Eleanor said, with firms, I think you need the diversity, not just gender-wise, although I think gender is hugely important and the female population in law is supersedes male now. I think you're looking at people who have different life experiences, whether that be in a caring role or their background in terms of their education. I think you completely miss that market. So I think it would be unfortunate if law firms and or other companies continued not giving equitable opportunities. And I think it will be the businesses that will start to fail, because people will find opportunities because there will be new ones created for them and those firms will flourish. So I think it's definitely something that we can't stop the momentum. It needs to carry on and grow and develop wherever it needs to go. So no, I think it pretty much sums it up.
Yeah, I think that last point you said is really important, because it is clear that a failure to properly consider those reasonable adjustments are going to result in people being unfairly left behind in that scenario, but then something new coming up front that says, actually, we can do it much better. And as times change, they will succeed, they will excel, and everyone else will be left behind. So we see something as common sense at IDR Law, because we're very much, I will say so myself, we're ahead of the game. So we do see these things as common sense. A reasonable adjustment in the eyes of equity is just sensible. But it is a failure that you quite rightly point out, as has everyone spoken today, that others don't make those adjustments, and it's going to cause many issues for them, but also issues for women and those main carers in the workplace. Having historically been on the receiving end of unfair treatment, I know firsthand how detrimental it can be to a person. What we've touched upon today is that actually it's not uncommon for women to be overlooked promotion due to maternity leave, for example. Many women in the profession are forced into accepting such leave as a defined career break, when it doesn't need to be. There's no reason why someone that's doing that caring role suddenly has to say, well, that year that I wasn't at work was pointless. Obviously, it's not pointless. New skills and experiences have been gained, if nothing else. And to be honest, having had children, I know a lot more can be gained from that time off. And so thinking differently about it and offering not just equal opportunities, but opportunities that enhance the experiences of your employees will have you the best chance of retaining talented people who, as we've said, may otherwise have been overlooked and may be left behind unfairly. During our discussion today, we've spoken about the potential issues that can arise, which would otherwise prevent a person from meeting their full potential. These ideas may not seem new, but they are more scarce than many imagine. And so today we celebrate International Women's Day as an ongoing reminder that while we have come a long way in the last 150 years, there is still a long way to go. Unless any of the panel have anything else they would like to share with us, this will bring us to the end of our session today. May I thank the panelists for their time and for sharing their experiences. I hope those watching and listening have found the discussion points beneficial. Before we go, I would like to just finish by mentioning our next training session. This will be through the IDR network, otherwise known as the IDRN. The IDRN is our online referral and support space and has been created to provide you with all the information you need should a contentious case land on your desk, along with general resources, guides, and commentary for non-contentious browsing. Our monthly webinars and training sessions are the perfect way to keep on top of your CPD requirements and are ideal for anyone working in the wills and probate sector. Our next session is on the 21st of March 2023 at 12 p.m. and will delve into the complex world of trusts. I do hope you will be able to join us. All of that said and aside, I just want to thank the panelists once again for joining us, and thank you all for watching and listening. I do hope you can join us again next time.